Well, I'm delighted to be here this evening with all of you, but more so, I'm delighted to introduce our presenter this evening. Vivian Williams-Kurutz is a Carroll alumna from the class of 1986. She is founder and executive director of Harlem Wellness Center, a health activist, community organizer, a speaker, workshop facilitator, yoga and meditation teacher, and a writer. Through the promotion, education, and engagement in accessible wellness programs that address health disparities, Vivian works at the intersection of racial, health, and environmental justice. She is committed to helping to co-create a vibrant, healthy local community and world. Along with her husband, Vivian is co-partner of Plowshares Coffee in New York City. At Carroll, Vivian was a theater arts major, and she recently re-engaged with our university with her involvement in alumni discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in the last several years, she has hosted some Carroll student groups while they were visiting New York City during their pre-college programs and their cross-cultural experiences. It is my pleasure to introduce Vivian Williams-Kurutz. It is yours.
Thank you so much, President Nettinger, and for this amazing opportunity and honor to speak with the Carroll community. And I also want to thank you, Dolores Campo, and your team for everything that you've done behind the scenes to bring this evening into fruition. It's amazing that through Zoom, we're able to connect from across the state of Wisconsin and across the country. I'm here in New York, and maybe someone's even out of the country. So to help bring us all together in this common space, I would just like to take a moment for a few breaths to anchor myself and to anchor my intention for our time together. And I invite you to do the same if you like. Thank you. So my 7th grade teacher, Miss Jones, introduced me to theater. While a lot of the other kids were outside at recess, me and a few of my friends were in her classroom doing improvisation exercises. And I really got into it, so much so that she said she has to do something with me. So she got me involved in a children's theater company. It was called Trailer Theater. And Trailer Theater attracted students from all over the city, all over the metro area. And we would rehearse a musical for a month. And after that month was up, we would take our show on the road. We'd hop in a yellow bus and go around to 3 different playgrounds a day. And then a trailer would meet us there, and the hydraulic lift would open up, and a whole theater was there. We'd bring out our velvet ropes and put them on the playground, and all the kids would run from the slides and the swings, and they'd sit behind the velvet ropes, and they would watch our show. I was in love. And I decided very early on that I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to go to college and study theater arts. I wanted to move to New York City and attend a theater conservatory program. And I wanted to live in New York City and pursue a theater arts program. Now, when it came to college, Carroll wasn't exactly what I imagined. I kind of pictured myself at a school that had about 10 or 15,000 students, not about 500 more or less than my high school. I also thought I would live a little more than 30 minutes away from my hometown. But there were several factors that went into my deciding to attend Carroll. But the most important factor and the final factor was a weekend campus visit at a party school. After that, I was like, Carroll, here I come. And thus I began my 4-year theater program. After Carol, I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York City, and I never left. I know that New York City brings up images of Times Square and skyscrapers for a lot of people. But New York City for me is where I found love. It's where I teach my 7-year-old goddaughter to tap dance. It's where I walk my dog in Central Park and ride my bike along the Hudson River and have holiday meals with my friends. It's my city. And I remember my first day there on October 1st, 1987. I hadn't ever even stepped foot in the state of New York. And I'm standing on the corner of 76th and Broadway, waiting for my new roommate. And I feel the concrete underneath my feet. I'm looking out at the city around me. I take in a deep inhale and I utter these words: I'm home. But as the saying goes, you can take the girl out of Wisconsin, but you can't quite take all of the Wisconsin out of the girl. I'm still very much a Wisconsin girl. I grew up in a tiny little pocket in Milwaukee. It was probably only about 6 by 8 blocks bordered by viaducts and highways and major avenues. And on these blocks where I cartwheeled, rode my bike, and jumped double Dutch for hours, I experienced something so sweet. I experienced a glimpse and a taste of Dr. Martin Luther King's dream for beloved community. It was truly a melting pot, a kind of little New York. My past coworkers would come and visit our house, and when they'd see our friends running in and out, they eventually nicknamed our house the United Nations. My neighborhood was by no means perfect, but in a city that was rife with racial tension and segregation, it was a beautiful community experience. And the funny thing is that I never really used the word community. I can't remember ever using it before I was well into adulthood and involved in community development work. I didn't aspire to community. It wasn't a thing or a concept. It was something I lived. It was in my blood. So I was always consciously or unconsciously trying to bring diverse groups of people together to try to recreate something similar, or maybe even something better. Steve Jobs famously said that we can't connect the dots of our lives looking forward. We can only look back. So when I was 10, one of the few things that could keep me in the house from jumping double Dutch, riding my bike, or doing cartwheels on the sidewalk was yoga with Lilias Folan on PBS. Does anyone remember that? I remember even at 10 years old, I couldn't do that full lotus pose. And after all these years, I still can't. But there was something about yoga that ignited a spark in me that I didn't quite yet understand. Fast forward 10 years, I'm at Carroll College and I'm in a theater improvisation troupe that we titled Vagabond Theater Conspiracy. And one day, one of the members of our troupe was leading warm-ups, and he started doing yoga poses. And that spark inside me that I'd had at 10 years old was reignited. Fast forward almost 10 years after that, I'm at Steps Dance Theater and Studio in New York City. There's a yoga class, a ballet class on this end, a musical theater class, jazz class, and tap class. But at the very far end of this studio is a tiny little room. This is 1991, and there were 3 people in that class, including the teacher, and they were doing yoga. So every time I would wait for my class to begin, I would sit there with my forehead pasted against the glass, watching, mesmerized, until one day I finally traded in my dance classes for yoga. And that eventually led me on my very first yoga retreat in 1993. It was a little farmhouse in upstate New York, probably cost about $250 for the 3-day weekend, not $1,500 or $3,000 that yoga retreats cost nowadays. But on that farm, something happened. The combination of nature, eating whole foods, yoga, and meditation gave me this very profound sense of balance and well-being. And when I left, I wanted to figure out how I could incorporate some of the elements from this experience that I could use in my life in a sustainable way. And that put me on this quest and path for holistic health and wellness. And it was a personal quest until Providence stepped in. It was when my friends at church asked me to teach them yoga. And I did, every Monday for 4 years. And in doing so, it was the first time since my youth that I found something that made me feel as alive as theater. Howard Thurman said, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive." Often, the only African American in my class, in my workshops, and at the retreats. And that's even still the case today. So I got really excited when I saw the people in my church from a diverse background and the neighbors from the surrounding blocks starting to come to the yoga classes. I saw them benefiting and transforming, people who never imagined themselves doing a down dog. So I started dreaming about going deeper and offering more, because at the end of class, people would come and they would ask me questions or they would want advice. And it felt really heavy on my heart that I couldn't give them the attention that they deserved. So I started praying and asking how I could go deeper. And when I shared this dream, some people said to me, "Why Harlem? Why don't you go downtown? That's where it's happening. That's where the money is." They even had new agents whose jobs were to make yoga teachers into stars. But my answer was that it was important to me to bring wellness to a culture of people that had subsisted for centuries on the art and science of survival. It was important to me to bring this wellness program to people dealing with the highest life stressors and the highest rates of adult onset diseases, hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease, to a community where the leading cause of death is heart disease, cancer, and strokes. It's old news that African Americans have a low average life expectancy than their white counterparts. But today, August 12th, 2020, an African American woman with an advanced degree is still up to 3 or 4 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related causes than a white woman that has not completed high school. I know, because I almost died from pregnancy-related causes. Serena Williams almost died from pregnancy-related causes. And Beyonce Knowles is very open about her health scare with preeclampsia with her twins. Preeclampsia is most common among African American women, and it puts the life of the baby and the mother at risk. So you see, with Serena Williams and Beyonce Knowles, their wealth or access to the best resources could not erase the epigenetic consequences. Dr. Anthony Fauci recently acknowledged that COVID-19 has shined the light on health inequities. Well, I've seen it with my own eyes. On the block where we have our studio that provides services for public housing residents, there's a church where at last count, 15 parishioners died from COVID-19. My friend Wanda, and she's also an employee of Harlem Wellness Center, lost her mother to COVID-19. And I personally lost my friend Emma, a nurse, to COVID-19, and my friend Dale. Recent photos of a protest for racial justice showed medical professionals holding signs. Two of those signs struck a chord with me. One said, "Racism is a public health crisis." The other one said, "Racism is making our patients sick." I am reminded of these words by Dr. Martin Luther King, a man who witnessed the most atrocious forms of inequity. He said that of all forms of inequity, injustice in health is the most shocking and inhuman. There's a store in New York City called Garden of Eden. It's called that because it has the most beautiful produce, the colorful fruit section, the vegetables, and an amazing fish stand. I went there not long ago to buy wild salmon, and I had a beautiful piece that was about $40 that I had purchased. Put it in my basket, and I went around to the store and picked up some other items. I paid for my items and went to the car. I opened the door and my husband said, "Did you remember the asparagus?" I was like, "Oh no, I'll run back and get them." So I grabbed the asparagus and a few other things. On my way out of the door, the manager stopped me. He wanted to look in my bag to see if I had stolen the salmon. My blood pressure shot up. My head started to feel this sense of swelling. I felt a burning in my heart center. I was trembling, I was humiliated, I was embarrassed, I was enraged. And the cortisol hormones were raging through my body, these toxic poisons. I'm speaking to you now from upstate New York. I've been coming to this area for the past 20 years. It's God's country. I walk on these secluded roads, and it's so healing and restorative. It feels like you can touch the clouds. The trees are coming in to embrace you. But recently, I stopped walking on these roads because the trucks with the Confederate flags and the mayhem that went on in a recent near town to stop people from supporting Black Lives Matter have caused me to wonder when that truck or car comes behind me if I'm safe. I'm fearful for the first time. And that walk that was so healing and restorative for me is no longer that. My mother used to drive me to Carroll from Milwaukee, and she dreaded it every single time. Without exaggeration, almost every time, 4 out of 5 times that she drove me to Carroll, the Waukesha police would pull my mother over and ask her where she was going. And when she told them she was bringing her daughter to Carroll, they would say, "Go ahead and let her go." The stress that caused my mother caused the cortisol to run through her body unnecessarily. You see, these stress hormones are reserved for special occasions. They were designed to protect us. The adrenaline to dilate our eyes so that we could see more clearly, to help us run faster, to get out of trouble, to help us be able to have the strength to fight and protect ourselves. But when these hormones are raging through our body every day, multiple times of the day, it begins to break down the immune system, and the body is not able to fight diseases that stronger immune systems can fight. The body is not able to break down and fight COVID-19. Wellness is a $1 trillion industry, but the products and the spas and the classes and the workshops and the retreats are not always inclusive or affordable or culturally relevant. They're not always neighborhood accessible. So for me, the why of what I do is very clear. I wish my family had had access to the information and the experiences that I have the honor of sharing with families. My Uncle Willie died at 40 years old of a heart attack. My last memory of him is sitting on his lap at my grandmother's dining room table with my family surrounding us. Everyone is laughing and talking, and I can feel the vibration of his laugh. My Aunt Maddie has a smile that's so big she lit up any room she'd go in like a Christmas tree. I would take the Greyhound bus to Chicago to spend a week with her in the summer. And that was a new cultural experience. But my Aunt Maddie died of cardiovascular complications at age 64. And my cousin Pat, she taught me how to twirl a baton, and she thought it was an excellent idea to take me to an all-night gospel skate-a-thon that started at 7 p.m. and ended at 5 a.m. We're not able to laugh about that anymore because Pat recently died at age 62 of cardiovascular issues. My work is very personal, and it's alive in Harlem Wellness Center. Harlem Wellness Center works at the intersection of racial, health, and environmental justice. Our mission is to educate, motivate, and support lifelong healthy living practices in Harlem and beyond. Seeing the devastating impact of COVID-19 and health disparity on the community in general, I am even more committed to being part of the solution. Sometimes I feel like this little rudder trying to move this very big ship. And there are days that are difficult, And then I tell myself, but isn't that why we're here? To be rudders? We all know that we don't have to start a nonprofit to be a rudder. And to tell you the truth, I am more surprised than anyone that I'm doing what I'm doing. In the early days of the Harlem Wellness Center, as the executive director, I spent 75% of my day working outside of my comfort zone, wearing hats that were too big or hats that are too small. And I still am. In 2015, I was lying in bed and I felt a sensation that I had never felt before. It was a funny feeling in my chest. It was a pressure, a tingling. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, this is anxiety. This is fear. This is pressure. And this is coming from the person that decided to leave Wisconsin to have a theater career in New York City. I'd taken on a lot. And so it was pretty counterproductive that I was promoting health and wellness, but I was so stressed out. So when people ask me about starting a nonprofit and they tell me about their dreams, my first internal response is, oh! But my second response is to say to them, one, look around. See if there's somebody doing what you care about. Because grassroots projects are often under-resourced and they need your talent and funds and skills. Logs in a fire burn brighter when they're together. The second thing I would say when people say they want to start a nonprofit is do the work. Just do it. If you want to mentor children, find a few children at your local church, community center, synagogue, or public school, and start there. If you want to feed people, find people who are hungry and begin satisfying that need right where you are. And then if it takes off and has a life of its own and needs a structure to move the mission forward, that's the perfect time to start that nonprofit. Now, as challenging as this process has been, there's one thing that has helped me more than anything else. Drum roll, please. My theater training. I don't know if it's the case now, but when I was a theater major, we were required to perform 500 hours of theater practicum in order to get our degree. And in this theater practicum, we would do stage managing and house managing, carpentry, which makes me my mother's handy person. We would do electric and lighting and props and costumes. We had to be agile. And it gave us a deep respect for how all parts of a system work together for the whole. The arts train you to have an idea, a spark in your imagination, and to bring it from nothing into life and existence. I sincerely draw on the skills I learned in theater every single day of my life. I am now a better community organizer because of it, a better presenter. I'm not sweating. My palms aren't sweating right now. I'm a better salesperson, team member. And I want to just put a little plug in. And I'd like to say to you parents who are utterly horrified by the idea of your child studying the arts. The skills are so transferable. Over and over again, I've seen my friends and my peers in the arts be able to pivot to careers as an entrepreneur, event planner, in real estate, restaurant ownership, teaching. And my friend Lisa, who has a musical theater degree and is now VP at a major bank. And this is all while satisfying this dream that they had. When I told my father that I wanted to pursue theater and be an actress like Cicely Tyson, he said to me, "I want you to live a long life. That's my hope for you. And in the twilight of your life, I want you to be able to look back at your life, be able to ask yourself the question, did I pursue my dream? And no matter what happened, I would love it if you were able to say yes." So as I take you on this journey, you're able to begin to see how some of these dots have connected to lead me into a life of service. When I think of community service, I imagine a quilt. I think of each person managing one little square on that quilt, pouring their energy and their talent and their resources into it, and that connecting to the next patch and the next patch, and it growing so large that it covers all of us and all of our needs. To close, I would like to share an excerpt from the Audre Lorde Project that speaks to this and that I feel is very apropos for the times we're living in today. It begins, "In moments of grief, crisis, or trauma, and in the time before and after, we need each other. We need each other to survive and thrive. We are obliged to lift up, honor, and hold space for our self-determination, to fight for our lives and to remind each other of our worth and that none of us are disposable. In a time and place where we, and especially Black, Indigenous, people of color, and LGBTQ+, are murdered, disappeared, hurt, isolated, silenced, imprisoned, and deported, it is a radical act of self and community love to name our trauma and needs and to love each other fiercely to meet those needs. We have been conditioned at times to turn out and away from the pain in our communities and the relationships that hold us. But in this moment of community strife and pain, let us find each other. Let us radically turn into each other. Let us radically turn into each other with love. Thank you.